Chapter 621. Cat Eye's super blunt words caused Xianxi's cheeks to turn pale. She felt as if her feet were covered in lead, unable to lift them up. She unconsciously stopped walking and Cat Eye's immediately stopped as well. The two stood in the stairwell and the atmosphere naturally became heavy. Xianxi knew that she had lost her composure, but she was unable to control it. From her perspective, Cat Eyes was undoubtedly giving her a stern warning. Cat Eyes told her not to have wishful thinking and enter the level and domain of the inner world. Perhaps this was also a warning. The problem was that her plans, hopes and fantasies were all going to turn to ashes just because of a single sentence from Cat Eyes. Miss Cat Eyes. Xianxi spat out the words with great difficulty. I told you. You don't need to be so polite. Cat Eyes turned to the side and crossed her arms over her chest. She looked at Xianxi's expression with interest. I just spoke a few words of truth, that's all. Before Xianxi arrived at Gear, she never imagined that this would be the situation. It must be known that she invested all of her energy into Professor Pan at the end of the year. It wasn't purely for the sake of obtaining a corresponding offer. It was for the sake of saving the country in a roundabout way. She wanted to use her relationship with Professor Pan to further tie herself to Luo Nan's network. On Professor Pan's side, she succeeded and gained the old lady's love and trust. However, when she turned around and wanted to take advantage of the situation to win the final result, she was told, "You simply don't have the qualifications to do so." A few breaths later, Xianxi tried to regain control of her mind, but it was to no avail. It was at this moment that Cat Eye's voice entered her ears once more. Her voice wasn't loud, but she could hear it clearly. Let's not talk about whether or not you can become an ability user. Let me ask you one thing. What is your goal? Goal. Yeah. Do you want to enter a new domain and adventure? Do you want to obtain more capital to live a better life? Do you want to borrow new strength to solve old troubles? Or do you want to satisfy your ambition to continuously improve? Xianxi was a bit stupefied. She didn't know how to respond. Cat Eyes hooked a finger at her and continued down. At the same time she said with a chuckle, "You can seriously think about it and find your position. Many people yearn to be a star, but when they enter the entertainment circle, all they get is an assistant. The feeling of being served and being served is completely different, right?" Yes. Xianxi's mind was muddled and her heart was unsettled. She didn't even know what she was saying. Like a marionette, she followed Cat Eyes step by step. Very soon they arrived at the sealed entrance. Cat Eyes examined Xianxi's authority step by step and made a record. Then she brought Xianxi into the forbidden zone that had been sealed off for almost a week. The voice of the artificial intelligence sobered Xianxi up a little. She suddenly discovered that Cat Eye's words were extremely odd. Her heart skipped a beat and certain words blurted out from her mouth. As long as you have a clear location, you can also serve people. Say that to someone else. This time Cat Eyes did not even turn her head. She only waved her hand. There's no need to tell me too much. I'm not your life coach. It's just that in the past few years I've seen a lot of people in and out of the industry, especially the mentality of a bunch of people in the periphery, so I decided to chat with them and watch the show. Xianxi opened her mouth but was unable to continue the conversation. However, she was able to confirm Cat Eye's playful attitude. But she couldn't bring herself to be angry at all. On the contrary, the hope that had already been extinguished sprouted from the ashes, growing and spreading. We're here. This place is quite spacious. A lot of equipment hasn't been shipped in yet. There's no reception room or anything like that. I'll just lead you to the end. In any case, they should be done chatting soon. As she spoke, Cat Eyes had already brought Xianxi to the underground 7th floor of Gear. There was practically no difference in the layout of this place from a few days ago. There was a large expanse of spacious area, and only the innermost corner had the corresponding experimental equipment set up. Xianxi saw Luo Nan and the other two sitting on the ground in a very casual manner in the innermost side of the experimental area. Their hands seemed to be fiddling with stacks of paper drafts and the like. The color of the paper was clearly yellow. It was quite peculiar. Cat Eyes stopped 20 meters away from the three. Let's wait here. If you're tired, you can do the same as them. No need. Xianxi shook her head. Her gaze wavered a bit. It would fall on Luo Nan for a moment and then it would turn back to Cat Eyes for a moment. As for her state of mind and thoughts, they only became more turbulent. Cat Eyes suddenly turned her head. She gave a smile that was not a smile. Actually, I wouldn't have said these words to you 2 weeks ago. Then. After all, the situation is different now. Look at that person. Who? Mr. Papercut? Tianxi followed the direction of Cat Eyes' finger and locked onto the target, but she still did not understand the deep meaning behind it. 2 weeks ago I saw this person. He was probably destined to be a support for his entire life. He couldn't deal damage. He couldn't support the overall situation. It would be hard for him to raise his cultivation and status. This is the result of the limitations of his talent. But now things are a bit different. Cat Eyes really dared to speak without the slightest scruple. At this time Papercut was completely engrossed in conversing with Luonan. He would wave his hand and gesture from time to time. His face was full of emotions, but he turned a deaf ear to the evaluation of others. Tianxi did not know what Papercut and Luonan were talking about, but she saw Luonan scratching his ears and cheeks. Luonan was so happy that he couldn't contain himself. Tianxi knew that it was certainly an extremely positive matter. Tianxi naturally had a simple inference when she combined what Cat Eyes had said before. Could it be that what Luonan was talking about right now was a method that could cross the barrier of talent? Tianxi's heart thumped loudly and she unconsciously took a step forward. She managed to control herself with great difficulty, but she still pricked up her ears and did her best to catch the bits and pieces of conversation that flowed over. The problem was that she had no foundation in the domain of ability users. Let alone Luonan and the other two being far away. Even if Luonan and the other two were close at hand, it would be impossible for her to understand what Luonan was saying. In a corner of the laboratory, Gao Meng, a B-rank ability user, had long since noticed Cat Eyes and Tianxi coming over. He shot a glance over and chuckled at Luonan. "You have an appointment with a beautiful woman?" "Private business," Luonan responded, but he realized that he had gone off topic. Before Luonan could explain, Papercut, who was sitting cross-legged and grimacing at the paper talismans scattered on the ground, raised his head in a daze. "Is there a problem?" Luonan and Gao Meng shook their heads together. "Now that we've reached this step, it's basically quite appropriate." Gao Meng snapped his fingers and a paper talisman on the ground quietly floated into the air. It spontaneously combusted without fire. The flame was like the finger of a god. It danced a few times and in the blink of an eye, the paper talisman was sculpted and twisted into the shape of a ring within the light of the flames. The ring's diameter was slightly thicker than Gao Meng's wrist. It floated down like a feather and was caught by Gao Meng's hand. Tianxi was stupefied from watching, but Papercut was eager to get into action. "Let's try again. Who wants to try?" Luonan simply responded, "Don't bother two masters for the same thing." Chapter 622. After 1,000th of a second, Gao Meng's consciousness cut into the incorporeal and majestic fortress in the depths of the storm. The energy storm surged ceaselessly in the outside world. There seemed to be a path of wind, but there seemed to be no pattern to speak of. There was only pure destructive power wreaking havoc. Any ability user who could enter the abyssal region had to resist and contend against this destructive attack before they could make a move. But ever since the space fortress was erected, the configuration built by the combined efforts of over 1,000 people grew from nothing. It grew stronger bit by bit, using a steady and conservative method to gradually expand its domain and deepen its imprint. This was a continuous process. In the overall design of the Ring of Blood Intent, a seed, a tender sprout, grew and catalyzed step by step, gradually becoming a towering tree that could resist the destructive storm. Just this alone made the Ring of Blood Intent, which Luonan promoted, ranked among the greatest inventions of the inner world. Gao Meng did not need to borrow external force to mentally wander in the center of the abyssal region. But how could a short period of time, measured in seconds, compare to the stability and safety of the fortress? The space fortress constructed by the Ring of Blood Intent was already the top choice of the ability users of Xia City. Even if they had nothing to do here, it was good to be able to admire the scenery of the abyssal region and watch the gods fight. Whether it was Gao Meng or the other ability users of Xia City, they were all having fun in this space fortress. But who would have thought that its inventor was no longer satisfied with his current achievements? He was currently attempting to make changes to it with a high degree of passion and urgency. The telepathic guidance is very clear. It still maintains its independence. It doesn't affect others. Gao Meng lightly scratched the thin talisman paper outside his bracelet. He felt the special ink fuse with the paper. It naturally guided the interference power to transform into an even finer and more exquisite power structure. It was just as Luo Nan said, "Don't bother two masters for one thing." As the representative of the ancient talisman school of the inner world, he was already familiar with the entire process of using talismans. No one was more proficient in this path than he was. Although Papercut was an expert in this field, there was still an insurmountable gap in his cultivation realm. Look at the main point. Cat Eyes lowered her voice to an extremely low level. She hinted to Xianxia, "That fake Daoist priest is a fierce person in our area. He sells talisman paper every day. But now he's like an obedient student in front of Luo Nan. What does this mean?" Xianxia said. She didn't know how to respond. In the end, it was Cat Eyes who broke through the paper window. "This shows that the one surnamed Luo has a thick thigh that everyone wants to hug. The weak wanted to break through and the strong wanted to become stronger. In this way, who can be more popular than the one surnamed Luo?" "Oh yes. The problem is, look at his thin arms and legs. How much volume can he have if he cuts off his entire thigh? Xia City, no, the people of the inner world will all want to get close to you. When the time comes, will they even give you a strand of leg hair?" At this time, if Xianxia still couldn't understand Cat Eye's meaning, then her 10 years of schooling would have been wasted. She followed up on Cat Eye's words, "What should I do?" Even under the dark eyeshadow, Cat Eyes still emitted a sharp light that streaked across the tip of Xianxia's heart. Taking a huge risk to do something that even we ability users can't do. Xianxia really didn't understand. At this time, Gao Meng continued to describe the feeling after using the talisman paper. The internal molding is basically complete and there is no interference. However, interference power isn't enough. We still need to cooperate to complete it. Someone come help out. "I'll do it. I'll do it." Papercut had already burned the talisman paper, forming a paper circle and pasting it together. Right now he just needed to send his telepathic thoughts into it and jump into the abyss. He went with Gao Meng to forge a brand new function for the fort. But soon, Gao Meng shouted, "Two people aren't enough. Cat Eyes, you go." Luo Nan's situation was special. Adding him would cause a deviation, so he immediately called out, "Who else is up there? Call them over. Follow Papercut's procedure. Once you get to the fort, just listen to Gao Meng's directions." Cat Eyes made an okay gesture and immediately contacted the personnel in charge of security. She gave clear instructions and walked forward. Her telepathic thoughts chased after Gao Meng and Papercut. Xianxia became a superfluous person in an instant. She didn't know what she should do. Especially half a minute later, a few ability users walked in with large strides. Everyone had their own duties. They were busy but not messy, making Xianxia look like a steak. There's probably no place for non-specialists in his field. Xianxia's mind was a jumble of thoughts. She was at a complete loss. A figure walked in front of her at this time. "Senior Sister Tian." "Ah, Senior Luo. Junior Luo." Xianxia didn't know how to address him, but it looked like Luo Nan didn't care too much. The smile on his face was the same as always. He wasn't that close, but he was very polite. "Senior Sister, sorry to trouble you to make another trip." "No, it's nothing." Xianxia didn't know why, but her heart tightened as she watched Luo Nan approach. Her many years of experience and quick-wittedness were useless. She subconsciously asked, "Junior, what are you guys doing?" Luo Nan didn't mind. He answered her question, "I want to add a cheat to the Ring of Blood Will. I want to put the results of my recent studies into practice." The Ring of Blood Will? Xianxia obviously didn't understand. She could only do her best to reveal a smile. "Sounds like a marvelous technique." "Oh, it's quite simple." Luo Nan wouldn't say much to a layman like Xianxia. He was just about to change the topic when Cat Eyes just so happened to exit the fortress from behind. She stretched her back. "You were the one who came up with this idea. Is there a problem?" Luo Nan was very baffled. "I haven't found anything yet, but there are enough people over there. I don't want to do experiments in a rigid manner, so I left." Luo Nan couldn't pay attention to Xianxia for now. He turned his head to glance at Gao Meng and the others, who were in the middle of deep experiments. He counted the number of people and made a preliminary estimate. Then he opened up the virtual work area and made a record. 5 people forming the basic functional module. There should be room for optimization. Tianxi couldn't hold back her curiosity. She focused her gaze and saw that aside from the scribbled words and numbers in the work area, there were groups of simple and complex geometrical figures. From the perspective of a professional designer, these figures undoubtedly possessed the meaning of a real structure. Though she was completely unable to understand them, Cat Eyes really didn't have the slightest interest in these things. She yawned half-truthfully. Isn't the ring of blood wool pretty good? You're going to toss and turn like this. Don't do something superfluous in the end. Everything depends on the results. Luonan didn't have absolute confidence, but he didn't hesitate in the slightest. He had gotten used to expressing his thoughts to Ruiwen during this time. Even though he had switched to Cat Eyes and there was still the layman Tianxi by his side, he still couldn't stop himself. He sort of sorted out his thoughts and vented. The ring of blood wool can be simple, but the fortress formed from it should have a more complex structure. Actually, if there were a few more clear-headed people over there, then there would be a more detailed division of labor in the design. It would inevitably jump out of a pure defensive mode and form the effect of attack and defense as one. In the end, whether it's the ring of blood will or the fortress, they should both belong to the basic framework. It is like a development platform. According to its rules and regulations, it should form a large amount of research and development results. It should form a system and a scale of existence. Oh, what I mean is that it is like a high-rise building. There should be all sorts of supporting facilities within the building to realize different functions. Luonan made the last analogy out of consideration after seeing that Tianxi was completely stupefied. Tianxi's cheeks flushed a bit and her gaze drifted. She really didn't understand the contents of Luonan and Cat Eye's discussion, but when she truly touched upon this mysterious and unfamiliar domain, even if it was just an insignificant corner, the trembling that came from the bottom of her heart spread throughout her entire body like an electric shock. It was like a spring dream awakened in the middle of the night. It formed a feeling of unbridled satisfaction. But emptiness and absent-mindedness were unavoidable after this satisfaction. Luonan didn't ponder over Tianxi's feelings. He just spoke apologetically, "Senior, I'm sorry. I haven't regained my senses yet. You came this time." Tianxi shook her head, using this opportunity to sort out her feelings. "It's nothing. It sounds quite fresh. Yeah, Junior, I came today to run errands for my teacher." Tianxi finally recovered a bit of the feeling of a senior when talking about matters of the normal world. Her body language relaxed quite a bit. "Some time ago I took the liberty to tell Professor Pan about your matters. She really does miss you, but she hasn't seen you come over. Plus, there are all sorts of design projects at the end of the year. She doesn't have the time to spare. It's not easy for her to have some free time, so she wants to invite you to her house." "Professor Pan is inviting me to her house?" Luonan was a bit surprised, but he quickly reacted. "It's my fault. I've troubled her with my matters." Luonan hesitated a bit when he spoke to this point. His eyelids drooped and he was a bit embarrassed. "Senior, you should be able to understand. I've offended a lot of people in the inner world recently and some of them are very tasteless. I'm worried that I'll get too close to Professor Pan and I'll implicate her." Tianxi went, "Oh, that's it." The nightmare of Ocean Sky Cloud City flashed uncontrollably in her mind at this very moment. Her face turned a bit pale. Luonan saw Tianxi's reaction and his previous judgment grew firmer. "It's absolutely true. But I can't tell Professor Pan about these things. Senior, come over. We can talk about it. We can think of an excuse, a message so that Professor Pan won't be angry. That's it. But Professor Pan is a very smart and very sharp person. It's not easy to hide things from her." Tianxi was unable to think of a way for a while, and her thoughts were a bit scattered. She couldn't help but ask, "Junior Nan, are you in a very dangerous situation right now?" "Hehe. Is there anyone who dares to go against Professor Luo?" Cat Eyes always loved to go against Luonan and it was the same right now. Luonan glared at her and turned to face Tianxi. "Of course it's much better than before. I also have time to do some research. But..." Luonan saw the change in Tianxi's expression at this point, and he shook his head to himself. He took the opportunity to give her a reminder. "Senior, Cat Eyes can really torment people sometimes. I've been bossing her around lately and she always wants to find a scapegoat. So you can trust her words but you can't completely trust her. Don't let her lead you by the nose." Cat Eyes raised an eyebrow but she just sneered. Tianxi felt a jolt on her back. Only now did she realize that her conversation with Cat Eyes had been overheard by Luo Nan. This made her a bit embarrassed, but when she thought about it from the bottom of her heart, she relaxed. She lowered her head, but the corner of her lips perked up. She sighed in self-mockery. If my heart doesn't have a direction, how could I be led by someone? Chapter 623. You really know how to make trouble for me. Luo Nan glared at Cat Eyes in a bad mood after Tianxi left the underground laboratory. You should be able to tell that senior sister Tian doesn't have any talent in this area. In order to pacify Tianxi's mood, Luo Nan deliberately sent her to the boundary of the 5th level before walking back. Cat Eyes followed him the entire time, paying no attention to the troublesome situation Tianxi had created. Yeah, I know. But I thought you were in urgent need of experimental materials. Luo Nan stopped at the corner of the stairwell. He felt that there was a lack of communication between him and Cat Eyes. Didn't you say that you wanted to readjust your sensing mode? That you wanted to do some filtering based on the configuration? Even though I don't really understand, I can clearly see the look in your eyes. Cat Eyes gestured with 2 fingers and jabbed at him. Luo Nan tilted his head back to avoid being blinded by Cat Eyes' sharp fingernails. You must be drunk. Hee. Don't say that you didn't want me to be your experimental subject. You're baffling. Cat Eyes raised an eyebrow. You look at everything around you, including inanimate objects and living objects. You want to substitute them into configurations, deconstruct and optimize them, right? Oh my, you're... Luo Nan blinked. He swallowed back the words roundworm in your stomach and so on. However, his expression revealed his true intentions. Do you really think everyone is blind? Cat Eyes sneered and crooked her finger at him. Let me borrow the work area. What? The work area of your drawing software. Luo Nan didn't understand what Cat Eyes meant, but he did as she said and opened up the interface of the work area. Since he had been conducting a simulation calculation of the external configuration of the blood intent ring not too long ago, the interface stopped at that moment. Cat Eyes didn't want to see this. She bluntly operated in Luo Nan's stead, saving and exiting. She flipped back to the starting interface of the previous level. Right now, a simple logo appeared before the eyes of the two. It could be considered a simple drawing of the structure of the blood intent ring, but it was separated out to highlight the wedge-shaped section inside. There was also a line of words below. The content was very simple. It was written by Luo Nan. Without a configuration, there was no way to stand. Cat Eyes chuckled. What a famous saying. Look at this sentence. You want to use configuration to explain everything, deconstruction and reconstruction, right? Luo Nan coughed. This was the inspiration he obtained from ancient texts. The original words were, if you don't learn poetry, you won't be able to speak. If you don't learn etiquette, you won't be able to stand. This was what Confucius taught his son. He had specially created this interface as a form of motivation for himself. Cat Eyes was quite thoughtful, but her imagination was a bit too big. Don't look at me like that. I'm flustered. Cat Eyes waved her hand. Do you know how much trash we've cleared for you over the past 2 days? Trash? Those tables, chairs, cupboards and so on that you asked for. Now the 5th floor is almost full. Do you want to go and admire the current state of the experimental subjects? It's pure corruption. Luo Nan tried to explain. I want to understand the spatial concept of configuration through these simple pieces of furniture. After all, the configuration is intuitive, and the space we're in is too empty. If we want to switch, we need to start from the basics. Cat Eyes raised her hands in surrender. Please spare me. It's fine if you go crazy by yourself. Don't drag me into this. You're the one who's going crazy. Luo Nan cursed silently, but it looked like Cat Eyes' temper was greater than his. I just want to say that if you want to be a Frankenstein, you can just say it. Let everyone be prepared. Others treat you as a savior, but the ark you've sat on is actually a man-devouring demon's lair. Luo Nan frowned. What are you talking about? Cat Eyes stared at him. The Blood Intent Ring and the Abyss Region Fortress are your experimental grounds, right? It's a good idea to test your inspiration, but there are practically all the elite ability users of Xia City there. Don't overdo it and capsize the ship. You'll be a sinner for all eternity. Luo Nan didn't get angry. Instead, he spoke with an extremely certain attitude. The plan I'm bringing out is certainly the most mature plan. In fact, the maturity and firmness of the fortress surpass your imagination. A few cheats, whether they succeed or not, will absolutely not shake the foundation. I'm not talking about that. Then what are you talking about? Even though you haven't been playing with that old hoodlum ghost eye for the past 2 days, do you dare to say that your previous practice was purely for the sake of improving and increasing? Even though there was no one else in the stairwell, Cat Eyes still lowered her voice. I don't know about others, but I'm a cat trapped in your cage. I'm choked to the point of nausea from your killing intent. She reached out to press down on Luo Nan's shoulder as she spoke to this point. She moved closer to his ear and said, "You're definitely thinking of doing something dangerous, right, Mr. Captain? Are you playing in a play?" Luo Nan retorted in a bad mood. He knew that there were some things that he could not hide from Cat Eyes, who was in the same closed system. He didn't bother hiding it either. I have my own considerations. Of course. Of course. It's the same for everyone. But can you not be too impatient? I'm impatient? I'm starting from the basic configuration bit by bit. Of course it's fine if you keep doing this. You see, I'm helping you find experimental materials, right? But the problem is, don't do things the way you did on the night of the 14th again, okay? Luo Nan's words struck him back to the night of the lecture half a month ago. He really did not understand Cat Eyes' meaning. What happened to me on the 14th? Did the lecture bother you? Hee, I hope you're just purely lecturing. Luo Nan's brows locked tightly as he locked gazes with Cat Eyes. A moment later, his gaze converged and his cheeks drooped slightly. I understand. Yes. While he was lecturing, he had adventured over the Pacific Ocean. He had engaged in a remote contest with 2 extraordinaries. He was indeed under the suspicion of being irresponsible. He had nearly capsized that time. He had implicated over 1,000 ability users of Xia City who had already mentally traversed to the space fortress. Cat Eyes brought up this matter again after half a month had passed. Was it because she felt that he had been too impatient during this period of time? Luo Nan didn't say anything more. It was good to understand some things tacitly. With the matter of Gong Qi pressing down on his heart, it was hard to avoid being impatient in his actions. He originally wanted to resolve this problem in the near future. He never thought that he would discover an even deeper mystery after taking Rui Wen on a trip to the cloud world. In a certain sense, this was a harvest. A great harvest. But if he didn't handle it well, he would undoubtedly dig a hole for himself. Luo Nan walked back with his head lowered. The layers upon layers of stairs beneath his feet were monotonous and unchanged. But in the end there was a limit and an end. But if he wanted to dig out the deeper mysteries of the cloud world, it was an enormous project that couldn't be measured. In the face of this enormous workload, killing Gong Qi was like a small problem that wasn't worth mentioning. It was like traversing 100,000 mountains just to pluck a single fruit. That fruit had clearly been within reach not too long ago. This intense contrast really tormented Luo Nan quite a bit. Right now he would silently recite the word patience several dozen times every morning. Only then would he be able to concentrate his energy and throw himself into the research work of basic configurations. Why did he create his own famous aphorism? This sort of hipster behavior forcefully encouraged himself from the ruins of his anxious and frustrated mental state. Cat Eyes' low voice continued to transmit over. There are some things that can't be done in a short amount of time. It's not bad to put them aside for now. Luo Nan let out a ha. He didn't respond. Cat Eyes continued to speak. Though I don't want to mention it, you are indeed in the position of leader right now. It doesn't matter if they are attracted to you or if they are imprisoned. Many people are acting according to your train of thought and thoughts. You are anxious and many people can't help but be anxious as well. Can't you see that Rui Wen's state hasn't been good these past 2 days? Oh, I know. Luo Nan had no choice but to speak. Not only did he know that Rui Wen's state was terrible, he also knew the most fundamental reason for this situation. Right now, Luo Nan was referring to the deep layers of the cloud world's configuration fragments. He was studying and understanding the basics of configuration with all his might, using this to correct his own sensing mode. The reason why he did this was to use his most outstanding ability to comb through the structure and foundation of the cloud world. He could penetrate the barriers of space and time and grasp the deeper mysteries of the cloud world. From Luo Nan's perspective, the deep layers of the cloud world's configuration fragments were indeed treasures that he could use as reference. However, his perception was limited, his movements were limited, and he even needed Rui Wen's support to enter and exit. Just the area of black fog that he and Rui Wen were in before was nothing more than a corner of the multi-layered structure of space and time. According to Rui Wen's explanation, the changes in the rules and laws of space were extremely large when one went deeper. It wasn't jumping from Asia to Africa, nor was it jumping from Earth to Mars. It was true space-time travel, jumping from one space-time to another space-time. The most appropriate comparison was to jump from local space-time to the cloud world. Wasn't it easy? But if the factor of gear was excluded, then think about Gong Qi's current fate. Rui Wen achieved the effect of becoming one with the environment through the chaotic resonance of the multi-layered structure of space and time. She finally penetrated the barriers and realized the jump. The problem was that the deep layers of the cloud world's space-time fragments were constantly changing. Sometimes the timing wasn't coincidental. She could only find an optimal solution with multiple compromises, and then use her own tyrannical explosive strength to penetrate through in one spurt of energy. Luo Nan would never be able to learn this move no matter what. He wouldn't even be able to find an opportunity to rely on his own strength to go back and forth in a short amount of time. Unless he was able to forcefully interfere with the entire structure of the cloud world with overwhelming strength. That would practically be on the level of the creator. It was completely unrealistic. From this angle, even if Rui Wen had taken a shortcut, how easy could it be? Every time Rui Wen entered and exited the cloud world, she did her utmost. Sometimes she would even respond to Luo Nan's request to explore deeper regions. Therefore, there were a few times when she was so tired that she nearly collapsed. Luo Nan obviously knew about these problems, but he really couldn't do without Rui Wen's support. Damn, he was back to square one. Luo Nan closed his eyes. He pressed down on his forehead, which was already beginning to heat up. He didn't speak for a long time. Torment himself. Torment others. Chapter 624. December 28th, Friday. It was finally the last weekend of the Gregorian calendar. The Chinese and Western festivals were almost over, and there was still more than a month before the traditional Spring Festival. The students and office workers in Xia City could only hope to hang on to New Year's Day. There were still 3 or 4 days before New Year's Day, but the businesses in the large residential area were still practicing under the lingering warmth of Christmas. Low-end recharges, high-end discounts, and fancy renovations. They had to dig out the last bucket of gold for the year 2096 before the end of the year. As the core area of the large residential area, Cloud City Water Village's high-rise buildings had undoubtedly become the center of activity for the surrounding students and residents. Whenever it was around dinner time, a stream of people could pass through the Water Village's underground parking lot all the way to Aurora Cloud Capital's rooftop observation deck. The taverns and restaurants that were usually lukewarm were also forced to come up with reservation clauses to deal with the huge number of tourists who could not be seen at all. Compared to these, the tea houses, cafes, and cold drink shops scattered around the various buildings as temporary stops for tourists were really hard to find. The group of cadres in the Mystic Arts Research Society found a bar with great difficulty and settled down for the time being. More than 10 people occupied 2 tables and it was quite crowded. A sharp-eyed person saw that there was a table in the corner of the bar, and only one of the 4 seats was occupied. He said, "There's an empty seat over there. A few of you can go over there." Over there? Hey, that person looks quite familiar. Nonsense, there are at least 10,000 faces in the large residential area. No, look, that person seems to be from our society. Isn't that perfect? We can get together. If he can happily give up his seat, we'll give him an extra 0. 1 credit. As he said this, someone got up and prepared to share a table, but as soon as his but left his seat, he was pulled back by his companion. "Are you stupid?" His companion pouted slightly, indicating that the idiot could see the expressions of some people on the other table. The other table was relatively spacious, and those sitting there were high-ranking cadres, vice presidents, investors, and so on. Among them, it was obvious that OK's baby face was dark, and his gaze was like a knife when he turned his head and glanced at the corner. Sitting diagonally across from him, Fei Jin was holding her chin and smiling subtly. Got it. Thinking of the recent news in the club, many people took a second look and suddenly realized, oh my, it's the legendary one. Why is Luo Nan here? There were some high-ranking members of the society who wished for the whole world to be in chaos. They directly asked the question. Ok's face turned even darker. Fei Jin was still smiling, but no one really broke the ice. Others might not know, but all of the high-ranking officials on the platform knew the origin of the devil ray in the lake in front of Gear on the North Shore. From beginning to end, no one had ever heard Luo Nan mention this matter. But when the mutant, which was worth 50 to 60 million, was stuffed into the lake as an ornamental fish, this already made clear the hard path and position of that person. Every single one of the society members present had a net worth of hundreds of millions. 50 to 60 million was not a large sum that was worth looking up to. But the reality was right in front of him. He had no ambition for the power of the society at all. He just wanted a laboratory for fun. Who would purposely poke at this guy when they had nothing to do? And so, after a short period of awkwardness, no one brought up the stupid topic of sharing a seat again. They just pretended not to see the person in the corner. The group of people began to order refreshments and drinks. They chatted to pass the time as they waited for the group activity that would soon begin. When they first entered the bar, Fei Jin, well, it should be said that she was possessed. She had already discovered Luo Nan's existence. In addition to the convenience of being a woman, her current position was the best position to observe Luo Nan. She could see Luo Nan in the corner just by raising her eyes, including most of his movements. And it was through Fei Jin's eyes that Lady Halder was able to size up the target she had been pondering for a long time. Lady Halder had adapted to the tool that was Fei Jin these past few days. She was familiar with the structure of Fei Jin's body and soul. She had a general understanding of Fei Jin's social connections. And Luo Nan had been cooped up in the laboratory all this time. It was really a coincidence that they ran into each other today. Coincidence brought opportunity. Lady Halder observed the target in the corner while chatting with a familiar face next to her. She dealt with Yuru. The reason why she was able to do this was because there were 2 or more souls placed within Fei Jin's body. Let's put it this way for now. The Blood Flame Order's seizing secret technique wasn't a direct method of possession. Instead, it was like taming a horse or herding a sheep. It used fear as a rein and despair as a fence to direct the behavior of the original soul, causing it to enter a wonderful half-drunk, half-awake state. It used the instincts deeply rooted within the body to deal with the majority of daily situations. When a special situation or a problem occurred, it would be forcefully corrected. This method seemed gentle, but in fact it burned vital energy to a great extent. It was extremely ruthless, and it would cause unavoidable harm to the host. Lady Halder didn't take it seriously. In any case, many-sided wouldn't let this person live after this. Right now, most of Lady Halder's effective attention was focused on Luo Nan's body. From her point of view, including Yin Lu, who temporarily shared this body, Luo Nan's behavior was very strange. Yin Lu heard the news and joined in at the last minute. She observed for a while, but she couldn't understand Luo Nan at all. Why is he being so picky? The virtual workspace opened up on the table in front of Luo Nan. There were many virtual structures that appeared to be parts, fragments, and even lines and strokes. They were densely packed, with many layers interweaving and even twisting together. Luo Nan was like taking out a ball of thread or picking out a toothpick. He meticulously disassembled them, but sometimes he even added a few strokes. The operation appeared to be quite complex. He should be doing some sort of classification work. Lady Halder carefully observed Luo Nan's operation in the virtual workspace, especially the last few steps of the multi-step cycle. It seems that the majority of those fragmented structures are meaningful, at least on the level of ability users. Meaningful? Is it referring to the effect of the interference force flow? This should be the configuration he spoke of and demonstrated. Lady Halder recalled the video materials circulating on the internet. She made a comparison and made a preliminary conclusion. The problem is that the details of the structure seem to have little to do with the Blood Soul Temple. Could also be that the disassembly is too fragmented. After all, there aren't many people who can stand at his height to understand the domain of configuration. I actually believe that rumor. Rumor. Order of Justice, Door of Truth, and the like. That nonsense from R. What else? Could it be that these fragmented components are all a part of his inspiration? Lady Halder believed that there were geniuses in the world, but she had always made a clear distinction between accumulation and talent. Of course, this wasn't the main point. From their point of view, if Luo Nan's attainments in configuration weren't related to the Blood Soul Temple, then it would truly be troublesome. Why did the Blood Flame Order's first ablatum and vice ablatum attempt to connect with Luo Nan? It was because the white bone mound that appeared in the Jintong Sea of Death was undoubtedly the configuration of the Blood Soul Temple. So they suspected that Luo Nan had a close relationship with Mo Luan, who should have died but didn't. On the other side, Luo Nan proposed a series of theoretical prototypes such as cage configuration and so on. He even developed the Blood Will Ring on this foundation. He built a fortress and successfully established himself in the Abyss District. This method, which was highly similar to the fundamental methods of a secret order, allowed them to see the hope of the Blood Soul Temple's structure taking a step further. At this very moment, in a certain corner of the world, the structure of the Blood Soul Temple had already materialized. But the problem was that it wasn't under their control. So whether it was in theory or in practice, they needed a clear fulcrum. They needed to firmly exert their strength so that they wouldn't be left far behind. They would be at a loss of what to do and where to go. Probing, questioning, and seeking support all fell upon Luo Nan's body at the same time. These two goals actually had inherent contradictions. Lady Halder didn't dare to say that she had a foolproof plan. She could only seek further contact with Luo Nan in order to carry out her plan. Fei Jin observed from a distance. The first ablatum and vice ablatum were pondering. With Luo Nan's identity and current situation, he shouldn't be posing in such a crowded place. There should be something he needs to do. Yes, there really is. Fei Jin's eyes swiveled, and her gaze swept over a familiar face that had just entered the door. The person behind her made a special effort to memorize this face. Tianxi. It was a rare normal person who had a close relationship with Luo Nan. She was once a high-ranking member of the Mutual Aid Association. Right now, Tianxi was following closely beside an old woman, blindly following her every step. The old woman was around 80 or 90 years old. Her grizzled hair was cut short and stood up like a boy. It was dazzling, but it appeared refreshing. Her figure was on the thin side, but her complexion was rosy. Her clothes were dignified and conservative, and her posture was ramrod straight. She appeared to have quite the bearing in self-cultivation. A group of people naturally saw the old woman when they passed by the two tables of the Xinyan Society. A few people subconsciously shrank their heads back, but even more people stuck out their butts and stood up to show the most basic respect. Professor Pan. The old woman shot a glance over, but she didn't stop. She just nodded in greeting. Under the complicated gazes of a group of people, she headed straight for the corner of the bar, which was Luo Nan's seat. As for Luo Nan, he was clearly excessively engrossed in the configuration fragments of the virtual work area. He only suddenly woke up when the two people arrived at the table. He didn't even bother to tidy up when he saw the newcomers. He hastily stood up. He was just about to greet them when the old woman across from him opened her mouth to ask, "You're Luo Nan?" Her words were clear and full of energy when she opened her mouth. Her voice was a bit louder than a normal person's. She didn't wait for Luo Nan to respond before speaking with furrowed brows. "You're just like your father. You've been infected with the bad habit of mysticism." Luo Nan was a bit stupefied. He subconsciously said, "Can you not mention him?" The corner of the old woman's mouth curled up. "I don't want to pay attention to that guy either." Luo Nan was fully aware that the atmosphere wasn't quite normal, but he couldn't help but have a good impression of the old woman. Tianxi gave him a meaningful glance at this time, and he remembered to greet her. "Professor Pan, Senior Sister Tian, please sit." This grizzled-haired old woman was the mentor of Luo Nan's mother, Bo Qingwen. She was the town boss of the school's design department, Professor Pan Wen. Chapter 625. After sitting back down, Luo Nan first closed the virtual work area. Then he followed the process he had envisioned before. He picked up the menu, wanting to ask Professor Pan what he wanted to order. The problem was that the light in his work area had just turned off when old Mrs. Pan, who was sitting across from him, projected her own work area through her wristband. Inside was a set of information forms. Old Mrs. Pan had a dull expression. She tapped on the work area and enlarged the form. "Let me give you a report. I'm quite curious as to what kind of young man would be so indecisive in the face of an old lady's invitation. So I used my authority as a teacher to access your real-time database file and investigate your background. The final exams haven't started yet, so the statistics of your academic results are flawed. But from the aspects of attendance, in-class tests, performance tracking and homework completion, you've been growing more and more restless lately. You've been missing quite a few classes, but the procedures are impeccable. You've always been able to pass through dangerous situations. It's filled with the stench of manual labor. Do you know someone with power? You're still using this sort of self-deceiving method in school. You might as well just take a leave of absence." Luonan and Tianxi looked at each other. Tianxi had no idea that her teacher had such a trick up her sleeve. She was in a bit of a predicament for a time. As for Luonan, he felt a bit dizzy from being smacked in the head like a brick. It was as if he had been kicked back to his teacher's home visit. Only then did he understand what kind of personality Tianxi had described as smart and sharp. Speaking of which, old Mrs. Pan had spoken a bit too deeply with a shallow acquaintance, but Luonan couldn't get angry. After all, she was an old lady. She was an elder. He cared about you. He could only rack his brains to think of a way to respond. And at this time old Mrs. Pan's sharp and strangely clear eyes stared over. "So I have to mention that you and your old man are carved from the same mold. You don't come to school to study, to enrich yourself and to perfect yourself. You don't do proper things. You go and do irrelevant things. You stir up trouble that you shouldn't get involved in. You also stir up the hearts of innocent girls and so on." Professor Panwen spoke without thinking, but Tianxi felt quite awkward listening to him. She braced herself and gave the old lady a bit of a reprieve. As for Luonan, his head and face were truly covered in dirt. The situation before his eyes was completely different from what he had expected. He practically didn't even have the chance to open his mouth to speak. It wasn't until Tianxi gave him another hint that he came to his senses. He didn't care about what other drinks he ordered and poured a cup of tea for the old lady as a sign of respect. This was supposed to be an entry point, but the problem was that the draft he had painstakingly memorized was now useless. He had no idea what to say next. Luonan gaped, but all he did was force out with sweat. Tianxi was worried for him. Just as Luonan was about to soothe his cheeks, old Mrs. Pan spun her teacup and raised her chin at Luonan. She pointed at the location of the work area. "What are you doing?" Luonan let out a long sigh of relief. No matter what, he could finally start a normal conversation. He hurriedly replied, "I'm doing some categorization work." He wanted to open up the work area once more and let the old lady look over it, but the old lady shook her head and refused. "There's no need to show me. I'm different from your father. I'm not interested in things that aren't in my field of expertise." Luonan was a bit startled, but he finally found an opportunity to cut to the chase. He didn't have the time to think too much and just said, "Professor Pan, my father was annoying back then. Let's not talk about him, okay? Actually, I've always wanted to know what my mother was like back in school. Can you tell me about it?" Professor Pan Wen's expression was calm. He just used his fingers to pinch the handle of his teacup. He had no intention of starting a conversation. Luonan could only brace himself and continue. "You might not know this, but I've always lived with my aunt and uncle. I don't understand the situation back then at all. No one told me." Luonan saw that he couldn't continue, so he could only cast his pleading eyes toward Tianxi. But then old Mrs. Pan's resonant voice entered his ears. "Qingwen was probably like this when she was in school. She did what she needed to do and dealt with the problems she was best at." "Old Mrs. Pan, why are you mocking me?" Luonan simply wanted to slap the table to death. Tianxi opened her mouth to speak, but she was stopped by old Mrs. Pan's stern gaze. Old Mrs. Pan didn't say anything after that. She just watched Luonan's expression. Just as the young man was embarrassed and reserved to the extreme, her fingers left the handle of her teacup and she slowly stood up. "Since you're so nervous yourself, then this old woman won't be an eyesore here. I have a family banquet today and it just so happens that it's upstairs. I'll head over directly." This was it? Luonan stood up bewildered. He didn't know whether he should urge her to stay or let out a sigh of relief. Tianxi didn't dare to say anything. She could only give Luonan a comforting gaze and extend her hand to help the old woman out of her seat. But her actions were reprimanded in the blink of an eye. "I can't recognize the road anymore. Can't I walk?" This was the first time Tianxi encountered such a situation ever since she came into contact with Professor Panwen. She was scared stiff on the spot. The two youngsters watched as the old woman moved out of her seat and walked out. They wanted to speak, but they didn't have the courage to do so. Luonan could only give Tianxi a meaningful glance, indicating that she should follow behind to avoid a situation. Tianxi took a deep breath and calmed herself down a bit. She nodded in understanding. Just as they were exchanging meaningful glances, the old woman in front of them suddenly stood still. She half turned around and said, Luo Nan? Right? Huh. Yes, Professor Pan. Luo Nan subconsciously straightened his body. Old Mrs. Pan's expression didn't change. She just looked Luo Nan up and down a few times before speaking. I can only say that your appearance isn't ugly. I heard that your family's conditions aren't that extravagant, and your glib tongue isn't that nimble. Presumably you don't rely on your face, money or flowery words to live. Of course you don't have the temperament of a leader. You have no way of making others bow down to you. Luo Nan was stupefied. He didn't know whether or not he should accept these evaluations. Old Mrs. Pan continued to speak. But even so, you still have Xianxia and a few people to help you. You can even change the school's database. It's impossible to do this just by relying on a person. I think that at the very least, you should be relying on your own ability to make a living. But if that's the case, then you're similar to Qingwen. That's good. The old woman suddenly smiled. The wrinkles at the corner of her eyes bloomed, but it was gentle, calm, and peaceful. Then she turned around once more. Her steps were gentle and she walked against the flow of people as she left, step by step. However, the last 3 words lingered between her lips and teeth, echoing in Luo Nan's ears. Chapter 626. The people of the Mystic Research Society were certainly unable to hear the conversation between the old lady and the young man in the corner. However, the odd atmosphere was enough for some people to see some clues. There were professional enthusiasts like OK among the high-level cadres of the Mystic Arts Research Society. There were also gossip lords who were extremely interested in private relationships. What's going on between Old Lady Pan and this Luo guy? Even if a 10th grade kid used his connections, he wouldn't be able to get into the School of Design. Where the hell did you guys do your homework when you were bidding? The designer of North Bank Gear is this bro's mother. Looking at the time, he was probably Old Lady Pan's disciple back in the day. Oh, I remember now. A few days ago Xie Junping chattered on endlessly. I got tired of listening to him, so I automatically blocked it. With this gossip lord mentioning it, it was hard for the 2 platforms to deliberately ignore Luo Nan's existence. The direction of the discussion naturally changed. Luo Nan's name was like a thunderclap piercing the ears of this group of cadres of the Mystic Research Society during this period of time. Sealing off the 3rd underground floor, directly confronting Vice President OK, raising a devil ray. These methods simply made it clear that Luo Nan was a big shot. This was a big shot that had appeared out of nowhere. Random people should get out of the way. But this kid clearly didn't even make it to the last bus to join the society. It seemed like his family background wasn't particularly outstanding. Was this gorgeous turn of events meant to harm the eyes of the people of the Mystic Research Society? Such an abrupt turn of events naturally created enough topics of discussion. If one were to dig deeper, there would be enough gossip waiting to be discovered or created. After pondering a few times, someone really did dig out a bit of information. Speaking of which, I've heard this name before. Hehe. You guys probably won't be able to guess who brought it up. The suspenseful technique was clumsy enough, but the timing was good. Others would pinch their noses and support him. The suspenseful person didn't let the gossip lord enjoy the limelight amidst a bunch of jeers. He successfully attracted a wave of attention. Only then did he reveal the answer. It's our great president. President? Tengi? I just remembered it. That was at the end of September, right? The club's shares hadn't changed yet, so I was in charge of the entrance test for new members. At that time, senior sister Tang was pretty much out of the picture and was only a vice president in name. But that day she specifically came over to greet me, saying that she would take care of Luo Nan during the interview. In the end, Luo Nan didn't come at all. That's why I have such an impression. Hey, what's their relationship? Keeping him in suspense, he said he's my friend's younger brother. Friend? Men? No girlfriend? Hee. In any case, there was one point that could be emphasized after a round of discussion. This fellow Luo Nan had help both inside and outside. Though his background was fuzzy, it could be seen from his performance that he was solid even within the Mystic Arts Research Society, where the 2nd generation gathered. Therefore, if he could avoid provoking them, he would. Professor Pan left her seat at this time. She refused to support her, but Luo Nan and Xianxia still wanted to see her off. The 3 walked past one after another. The two tables also shut their mouths. Those who had stood up with their buttocks in the air just now had to do it again, regardless of whether the old lady agreed or not. The two tables of the Mystic Research Society finally let out a sigh of relief when the three of them left the water. The topic of conversation became even more open. There were even people who began to feel injustice for OK. It's because of old Xia's nagging and some people's messy help that a lot of things weren't done smoothly during the theme week. Later on, it's like an aquarium. OK didn't appreciate these remarks at all. His face turned even greener. 8 Trigram Lord had a good relationship with Quebec. He sat next to OK, so he patted OK's arm and comforted him. Don't lower yourself to the level of this idiot. I heard that this bro's mother died early. He lacked love since he was young, so he drew a circle to occupy it like a family dog. He probably thinks that place is his mother's embrace and he's secretly crying. These words amused quite a few people. Actually, 8 Trigram Lord was a bit afraid of Luonan. But he liked to take advantage of people with his glib tongue. He saw Luonan leave the room and he laughed and added, "What do you guys think? From that bro's point of view, if someone were to go in and out of those floors, wouldn't it be the same as... Oh my god." A cup of half-hot coffee was directly splashed onto 8 Trigram Lord's face. His eyes, nose and mouth weren't spared. There was also his collar and front lapel. It was truly hot, painful and embarrassing. At this moment, not to mention the two nearby tables, even the surrounding area was stunned by the sudden change in the situation. The water bar actually went silent for half a second. "Feijin, are you King sick?" 8 Trigram Lord suddenly jumped 3 feet into the air. There was still coffee dripping down from his eyelashes. He had to wipe his hands, but his hands were spread apart. He looked like a duck that had been doused in boiling water. As for Feijin, the instigator of all this, she slowly put down her murder weapon. She had an elegant demeanor and responded with a faint smile. "I saved your life. No need to thank me." 8 Trigram Lord's mind exploded. If King. Old Chow. Go wash up first. Only then did someone come to their senses. They hurriedly stood up to stop the fight. No matter who was right or wrong, they had to first persuade them to leave. This was to avoid making an even bigger joke in public. 8 Trigram Lord's brain was basically muddled right now, but he was still subconsciously afraid of Feijin. He was pulled away by the people around him and he subconsciously stepped down from the slope. He walked out of his seat while cursing and waving away the support of others. He also tried his best to block out the strange gazes of the people around him as he walked to the bathroom. But before he could take 2 steps, someone passed by in front of him, blocking his path. He raised his head and saw Luonan's young and inexperienced face. "He's back." 8 Trigram Lord and Luonan looked face to face. He shivered in the next second and instinctively averted his gaze. It was also at this moment that cold air clearly grew in his cranial cavity. Even his brain juice was about to freeze. "He wants to kill me." An inexplicable thought popped out and pounded on his heart. Actually, Luonan didn't move at all. He just crossed paths with 8 Trigram Lord. 8 Trigram Lord's mind was in a mess. He simply didn't notice the multifunctional robot in front of him that was delivering refreshments. He just bumped into it and flipped the tray over. He even had to drink the boiling hot coffee. He screamed miserably and lost his balance. His face fell to the ground, bringing about another wave of chaos. 8 Trigram Lord's miserable state was right in front of them, but the 2 tables of the Mystical Research Society weren't able to react in time. The reason was very simple. Luonan's gaze streaked across the 2 tables as he walked back. The cold air seemed to be able to completely freeze the hot drinks on the 2 tables. Of course, the people's reactions and courage were frozen as well. Only when Luonan and Xianxia sat back down did someone from the Mystical Research Society get up to check on 8 Trigram Lord's situation. They helped him clean up and treat him. The others looked at each other in dismay. A few high-ranking officers finally reacted. They lowered their voices to the lowest level. "That person seems to be from the circle? Huh. He's the government, the military, or a special person from the Starry Sky Club. I'm C. Oh, no wonder. Why don't we leave? It's too obvious." After all, the Mystic Arts Research Society was considered a professional hobbyist organization. Plus, they were situated in a high-ranking domain with social authority. They had some understanding and contact with some half-true and half-false channels and circles. They soon discovered the mistake in the topic of discussion just now. There was nothing wrong with people with simple backgrounds. There was nothing wrong with people with simple abilities. However, it was very hard to deal with people with both backgrounds and abilities. This was especially true for these freaks who possessed some sort of super-social attribute. Maybe I should hire a bodyguard in a related field. Hee, a lackey who wears an exoskeleton armor every day? In the short term, it won't just be through the channels of the military. The problem is that we don't have any right now, okay? The group of high-ranking officers were undoubtedly in a difficult position. Only Fei Jin had a smile on her face from beginning to end. It was as if she hadn't been the one splashing that person's face just now. Many of her companions had no choice but to admire her information channels and decisiveness from such an enigmatic attitude. Some people tried to get some clues, but Fei Jin didn't refuse. She casually chatted awkwardly with this group of people. Her main focus was still on Luo Nan. She watched as Luo Nan and Xianxia sat back in the corner and conversed in low voices. She was thankful for Gossip Lord's stupidity. When Luo Nan's ice-cold gaze swept past earlier, it was only when he looked at her that his gaze softened. This was a good start. However, the controller behind Fei Jin didn't have any intentions of striking while the iron was hot. She paid close attention to the various details in the corner with interest. She combined it with the harvests from her previous observations and gradually came up with a basic train of thought. Boss. I remember that Multifaceted sent out an intelligence topic a few days ago. It's closely related to this person. They even invited an expert to conduct a psychological diagnosis. The name should be Persona. Yin Li's memory was trustworthy. Yes, a persona. Mrs. Halder smiled. That's just a half-finished product and the fee is so expensive. However, it's worth it now. Bring me that intelligence report. If everything goes smoothly, we'll know how to communicate with this person. The first and deputy ablatums of the Blood Flame Order were in a temporary foothold in Xia City. It was very easy for them to search through the information. They soon found the intelligence report that was being paid for. This intelligence report was more or less a summary. It specifically extracted information on Luo Nan's social interactions and carried out a relevant psychological analysis. The problem was that no matter how authoritative an expert in psychology was, it would be hard for them to determine the nature of an ability user, especially a powerful character. After all, every ability user more or less possessed a supersocial attribute. Even in terms of pathology, the structure of the body and soul would undergo structural changes to a greater or lesser degree. On a medical level, it could even be diagnosed as an organic lesion. Of course, this was far from the main point. Luo Nan's situation might be even more complicated. It was said that this person had been undergoing body modifications through injecting nerve drugs starting from the age of 10. Any expert would be flabbergasted when faced with Luo Nan's greatly mutated nervous system structure. They would be speechless. They could only make assumptions based on the external performance of the target. They could only make a general analysis and judgment. The conclusions drawn from Luo Nan's situation were rather rough. They weren't even convincing. Chapter 627. Dissociative Identity Disorder. Multiple Personality Disorder. Ever since DID appeared in the world, it had always been the subject of doubt. There were even quite a few experts and scholars who didn't believe that such a case truly existed in the world. Many times, similar diagnoses were unable to convince the masses. Yin Lu was one of those people who weren't convinced. DID? It's still latent? The diagnosis is too vague. Mrs. Halder laughed involuntarily. If you think the conclusion is oily, then you don't need to care about it. Those experts can't do mental and pathological tests. All diagnoses are like scratching an itch through their boots. It's better for us to figure it out ourselves. I'm more interested in the logic behind Multifaceted's name. Her intuition and judgment are sometimes more reliable than those so-called experts. As she spoke, Mrs. Halder opened the intelligence folder. There were statements, analyses, and even more valuable first-hand videos. The folder displayed all of Luo Nan's social interactions in public since his debut. What was especially valuable was the battle scene of Luo Nan making a name for himself in Ocean Sky Cloud City with several people from headquarters. It came from the surrounding monitoring system. There was also a portion of it. It was the footage of a series of clashes before and after the incident at the municipal plaza. This was the information recorded by the psychic wave network. It was of a very high secret level in the Xia City branch, but it had been retrieved by the all-powerful multifaceted Sun Jui. In addition, there were recordings of semi-public and semi-private areas of Acumen College, Aurora Cloud City and others. Mrs. Halder followed her own train of thought and reclassified the above information. Her methods were very clear. She classified Luo Nan's interactions with his family and friends in the secular world into one category. She classified Luo Nan's interactions with members of the inner world into one category. In addition, she classified Luo Nan's discussions of cultivation theory and lectures into one category. Yinlu looked at the rearrangement of all kinds of information and thought about what Mrs. Halder had said before. She had a faint understanding. Boss, you want to start with Luo Nan's personality. Subdivide the persona? Mrs. Halder just minded her own business and just nodded slightly. The so-called persona was a relatively traditional concept of psychoanalysis. It roughly referred to a set of systematic patterns produced by the human body in order to adapt to the outside world. It could also be said that it was the outer layer of one's personality that concealed one's true self. Simply speaking, the persona was a person's social nature. Every person had many kinds of masks. Each mask was a facet of their social nature. When put together, they would form a complete personality. This concept originated from Jung's personality analysis psychology theory at the beginning of the last century. This theory was no longer at the forefront of academia, but it could still play a role in related fields. This was especially true for its core personality holism, which treated the mind as the object of research. It had a miraculous synergy with the mind and soul, which was why it was more suitable for use on ability users. In recent years, the otherworld variant of this theory had maintained a certain level of popularity. Yinlu was the vice officiant of the Blood Flame Order. Even if she had always been a little neglectful, she still had to study the control of the believer's desires. With Madame Halder's reminder, she immediately had a lot of ideas. But she also understood that these hasty thoughts couldn't withstand serious scrutiny, so she still asked honestly, "What's the matter? Boss, is there any chance for us to cut in? That depends on whether we can accurately capture his dominant mask." According to this theory, there was no distinction between the real and the fake when everyone had multiple masks. One just needed to look at which mask was used the most often to be considered the dominant mask. It basically encompassed the most basic personality traits. However, there were many times when there was more than one dominant mask. Madame Halder already had a basic judgment. Luo Nan is a relatively simple person. Right now he has several external masks and he can more or less form a complete personality. She pulled out the list of information on Luo Nan's interactions with his family and friends. She arranged them in chronological order, forming a fairly clear timeline. There's no need to mention this person's miserable childhood. It has certainly influenced his personality traits. Luo Shuqing and Mo Haiheng have become his guardians, and their attitudes and behavior have been extremely positive. They even dote on him a bit as compensation. Their biological children are actually inferior to him in terms of treatment. He is the one being taken care of in his family and in normal social relationships. From the information we can see that Luo Nan's older cousin Mo Ya is quite powerful. His older cousin Mo Ping is quite lively, but he is quite protective of Luo Nan. The stimulation of these two personalities as well as the difference in treatment will likely push him to grow in the opposite direction. This is because this will allow him to maximize his profits. This interaction has caused him to be both sensitive and introverted, but he is also obedient and low-key. He has displayed a weak and passive side. Yinlu concluded in a low voice, "The weaker he is, the more he is favored." Of course, this wasn't the result of Luo Nan taking the initiative to exert his strength. Instead, it was the long-term effects of his unconscious infiltration. Yes. This is Luo Nan's mask of weakness. It is the mode of communication he is most accustomed to using over the years. Then this is one of his dominant masks. Madame Halder didn't directly confirm this. Instead, she interrupted her analysis and observed Luo Nan's corner through Fei Jin's eyes. At this time, Luo Nan was conversing with Xianxia in the corner. Madame Halder and Yinlu didn't use any supernatural methods due to their fear of this master of perception. They just used their professional lip-reading abilities to guess the conversation between the two. The subject of the conversation was still Professor Pan Wen. The old woman's sharp personality and attitude as well as her intense mood swings made Luo Nan a bit unsure. His mind was in a mess. Most of the time it was Tianxi who comforted him. This was probably Luo Nan's behavior under the guidance of the mask of weakness. It could be seen that Tianxi wasn't quite used to it. She most likely never expected that she would use this sort of position to communicate with Luo Nan. She was facing a weak, unconfident and even sentimental little Shota. This gave her quite a bit of trouble as she wholeheartedly hoped to hug his thigh. Even Yinlu felt a bit strange, let alone Tianxi. This was completely incompatible with Professor Luo, who was currently at the peak of his power. Fortunately, her train of thought grew clearer. Though I don't approve of the diagnosis of latent did from the relevant data, the separateness and contradiction of his mask of weakness are quite obvious. In contrast to the mask of weakness, there must be a mask of strength that possesses a dominant strength. Madame Halder simply said, "You analyze it." This. Yinlu hesitated a bit. She simply took Madame Halder's preliminary categorization of the data. She copied Madame Halder and pulled out the records of Luo Nan's official contact with the inner world. She sorted them by time and sorted them out. Looking at the formation mechanism of the mask of weakness, there are two types: imitation and practical application. I feel that aside from the bits and pieces he learned from his family and friends, the greatest source of his paradigm and practical environment can only come from the inner world. Yinlu paused for a bit and stole a glance at her boss's expression. Only then did she continue to make inferences. From the relevant intelligence, Luo Nan was suddenly pushed into a high-danger level event. There was practically no buffer at all and the intensity was extremely shocking. Luo Nan witnessed many casualties and unforeseen events with the human-faced arachnid. Then it was said that he directly participated in the underground fighting arena incident. He followed it from start to finish and it involved high-intensity confrontations. The Frost River reality incident on Fudong Avenue involved high-intensity confrontations, large-scale killings and he was heavily injured. Then there was Ocean Sky Cloud City. He directly killed people and he killed 4 people at once. Then there was the series of conflicts in the municipal plaza. Extraordinary level attacks and defenses. The 2000s of a young lady incident. Let's not even talk about it. From this series of events, we can see the ecology of the inner world in Luo Nan's eyes. Of course, he personally experienced it. It was a continuous, intense and high-intensity conflict. There was no lack of paradigms and environments. Luo Nan himself had the corresponding talent and ability. He quickly formed a direct, unyielding and cruel mask of strength. It was reasonable. Mrs. Halder's expression didn't change. She asked without thinking, and then the mask of weakness that has always occupied a dominant position for over a decade was far too different from the mask of strength that had just been formed. It led to separation and conflict. Halfway through her words, Yin Li's gaze swept across the information that had basically been categorized. However, there were clearly 3 groups of information. She suddenly became speechless. Halder didn't reprimand nor did he give any pointers. He continued to do the finishing work of categorizing the information. Instead, there were some changes in the corner where Luo Nan was located several dozen kilometers away. Tianxi's face revealed an astonished expression. She hesitated for a moment before getting up and sitting next to Luo Nan. The two of them leaned against each other looking quite intimate. Some people subconsciously curled their lips at the 2 tables of the Mystic Arts Research Society, but no one dared to open their mouths to say anything. Let's turn back time to half a minute ago. Tianxi had been struggling with Luo Nan's weak and wavering emotions ever since she returned to her seat. No matter how hard she tried, she found it hard to find the cold and callous element of subsonic life taking control of the demon from this youth. However, there was a very subtle sensation. A corner of her heart churned as she looked at Luo Nan like this. Just when she thought that the time they spent together tonight was about to be exhausted by this bizarre scene, Luo Nan's wristband vibrated. Ding dong. A message entered Luo Nan's private mailbox. It was a notification. Luo Nan was stunned. His main communication tools were the Hexear and his wristband. He mainly used instant messaging and messages. He would occasionally use the cloud space. This mailbox was only used for identity registration. It was practically in a half-abandoned state. Why would someone send him a message? He lowered his head and the wristband's intelligence captured the corresponding stimulus. A virtual interface popped up, highlighting the title and sender of the message. The title of the message was the default no topic. But under the rules of social authority, all formal communication on the internet required real name authentication. So Luonan saw a name that he could intuitively perceive. Chapter 628. This is Professor Pan's email number? Luonan was greatly surprised. Tianxi tilted her head to size it up. She confirmed, that's right. This is Professor Pan's private email. She set up her own server. I still remember the domain name. The content of the email was just a link. Luonan clicked on it without hesitation. The link led to a cloud space. Encryption measures were set up here. It was a privilege encryption. Only visitors allowed by the owner of the cloud space could enter with their ID. Luonan didn't pay much attention to the encryption method. He cut into the interface and his gaze fell on the highest folder in the cloud space. His gaze was a bit blank. The only folder that could be displayed was named Applied Research on the Coupled Design of Modern Architecture, Draft. Luonan clicked on the folder 2 seconds later and a message appeared. The target folder was approximately 4 petabytes in size. There were several folders and files inside. This storage number wasn't large, but it wasn't small either. Some people wouldn't be able to store a lifetime's worth of experience inside, but in some fields, it didn't seem to be much. Luonan's fingers trembled slightly and he clicked on it. A traditional window interface was laid out. The densely packed folders gave people a headache at first glance. But from another perspective, every folder was named according to an obvious rule. Letters, numbers and words were clearly layered. One could vaguely feel the structure and flow of a certain system if one looked at it carefully. Luonan scrolled through the interface and scrolled down to the bottom. The interface naturally captured the only document file on the interface. The name was exactly the same as the folder on the upper layer. Applied Research on the Coupled Design of Modern Architecture, Draft. Luonan's face twitched. He clicked on it again and sure enough it was a thesis. Since it was a draft, the format was relatively casual. His gaze skimmed over it and it fell on the author's signature below the title. It was impossible for him to overlook it and it was impossible for him to forget it. Bo Qingwen. Luonan's gaze froze. He subconsciously scrolled through the interface during this time, but the words, tables and diagrams inside seemed to have lost all meaning. Or perhaps his brain had lost the ability to accept and understand. It wasn't until he flipped to the end of the thesis that he saw the scattered sentences that were clearly unfinished, as well as the deliberately left blank space. Only then did he vaguely grasp a bit of context. "Senior, come over here." Luonan didn't even know how he opened his mouth to speak. Tianxi hesitated for a moment. She was most likely frightened by Luonan's expression and tone, but she still got up and sat beside him. His gaze, which he had intentionally shifted to avoid arousing suspicion, was now naturally directed towards the virtual interface. At this time, Luonan had already brought the interface back to the first page of the article, revealing the title and author. When Tianxi saw these, she also jumped in fright and almost cried out. "Yes, senior sister, my mind is in a mess now and I can't remember clearly. You've checked the relevant information. Is this one among my mother's published papers?" Tianxi immediately replied, "No, definitely not." "Really?" Luonan grinned. "This gift from Professor Pan is really..." His fingers unconsciously slid across the screen and the interface also scrolled up and down. Beside him, Tianxi said, "Junior, look at this table of contents. It doesn't look like a thesis but more like a book, an academic monograph." Luonan was a bit startled. He followed the direction of Tianxi's finger and looked. Then he immediately switched to the folder interface. But there were at least 100 folders of the same level. It was impossible to count them all at once. He decided to open up the system and look at the attributes. With just one glance he had an idea. As expected, there are more than 4,000 folders of different levels and more than 100,000 documents. If they are all reference materials for the thesis, it would be too exaggerated. But if it's a book, then it seems like it has just begun. He looked at the last edited date. It was actually May 2080, a little over a month before he was born. Luonan estimated that his mother should be in the wilderness at that time. No, it was also possible that Professor Pan had started writing. Luo Nan's mind was in a mess. Right now it really wasn't suitable for him to do more complex analysis. He could only forcefully turn his gaze away. And at this time he saw new information on the side of the system interface. It was the list of visitors who had access to the cloud space. Of course Luo Nan was on the list, and there were only 3 people who had access to the cloud space. One of them was Professor Panwen. Right now he was displayed as logged in. As for the other 2 gray names, Bo Qingwen Luo Zhongheng, the interface suddenly closed. This was done by Luo Nan. This was because he might not be able to control his emotions in another half a second. In fact, at this moment the tea on the table was already rippling. Let's go. Luo Nan didn't dare to sit any longer. He got up in a bit of a hurry, raised his head and took a deep breath. Beside him Tianxi got up to make way. She asked, "Let's go." Luo Nan didn't say anything. He walked straight out and Tianxi hurried to keep up. The 2 left the water bar with quick steps, causing the group of people from the Mystic Arts Research Society to let out sighs of relief. Previously, whether they should stay or leave had already made them very conflicted. Fortunately, after passionate love and intimate contact, they left first. Someone mumbled, "He's definitely going to vent." "Shut up." Shouts rang out in unison, forcefully suppressing this idiot who didn't know the difference between life and death. Fei Jin watched with a smile. She didn't react. But 2 minutes later she found a random reason and took her leave, separating from this group of people. She didn't care about the discussions of the people behind her. She didn't plan on wasting time in Ocean Sky Cloud City, so she went straight back. With Luo Nan's situation, it was impossible for him to stay too long in this crowded area. Otherwise, the security personnel by his side would probably go crazy. Right now there were 2 possibilities. One was to go home. The other was to return to Gear on the North Bank. With Fei Jin's status she could only choose the latter. She took the elevator to the 3rd floor underground and prepared to take the short tram back to school. But just as she squeezed out of the elevator with the stream of people, her mind suddenly stirred. She raised her head and saw Luo Nan's figure standing in the corner up ahead. He seemed to be talking to someone. Tianxi stood to the side quite a distance away. She even turned her face away a bit unnaturally. Clearly she hadn't blended in with the conversation. Her role was quite awkward. As for the person talking to Luo Nan, he was leaning against the wall. From Fei Jin's angle, only half of his brightly colored sportswear could be seen. He looked very young. The 2 controllers behind Fei Jin did not expect this to happen. This was indeed a chance encounter. But if it wasn't handled well, it would be no different from being followed in the eyes of Luo Nan, a master of perception. Luckily, Fei Jin's main controller was rich in experience. She didn't change the frequency of her steps. She continued to walk forward and she even called out a greeting when she got closer. As expected, Luo Nan turned his head to glance at her. His face was expressionless, but Tianxi next to him turned her head. She was a bit surprised. Tianxi's actions made the person on the other side of the corner lean over in curiosity. He whistled and said, "Another beauty. Your talent in this area isn't bad." His lively and frivolous reaction was indeed that of a young man. But at this moment the 2 first ablatums who were several dozen kilometers away were the ones who were shocked. "Tian Bang!" Inla cried out involuntarily. She was shocked, but there was also loathing and hatred. That's right. The person in the corner was Tian Bang, who had made a name for himself some time ago. This burner, known as the #1 person beneath extraordinaries, was dressed in overly gaudy casual sports attire. He was like a Chunibi youth who couldn't keep up with the trends. But it was this person who had stepped on Mo Luan and the Blood Flame Order and leaped up to stand at the center of the world stage. He was the mortal enemy of the Blood Flame Order. This was without a doubt. Such a mortal enemy had suddenly appeared before their eyes. Moreover, he was conversing intimately with another important target. What in the world was going on? The 2 controllers could not help but have similar thoughts in their minds. And at the scene, Fei Jin's footsteps stopped for a moment. Her gaze swept past Tian Bang's face. Her eyes were mixed with a series of micro-expressions of curiosity, astonishment and realization. In the end, her focus returned to Luo Nan. "Junior's friend. I won't disturb you any longer. You guys chat." Fei Jin smiled as she spoke. She gave a slight bow and walked a few steps to the side. She turned her head in a very natural manner and sized up Tianbang with a few glances. Then she turned her head and left. As the first mate, Lu admired Mrs. Halder's control of her emotions and details to the point of prostrating herself. Fei Jin, who had been under Mrs. Halder's control just now, had perfectly displayed the subtlety of a member of the outer circle encountering a heavyweight character like Tianbang. She had successfully recognized and secretly restrained herself. Forceful words were all about the details, but the most wonderful thing was still the word, natural. The automatic conveyor belt brought Fei Jin far away. Lu was still reflecting on the subtlety of their encounter when Mrs. Halder spoke. Did you feel it? Tianbang's current position had already exceeded the range of Fei Jin's natural perception. Lu would not make a low-level mistake and forcefully use an ability user's ability to detect him. So for a time she really couldn't understand. She frowned and said, Tianbang appeared here. I'm not talking about Tianbang. What does the matter we're currently handling have to do with Tianbang? Luonan? Lu struggled to free her attention from Tianbang with great difficulty. She seriously recalled Luonan's previous performance. It seems that his relationship with Tianbang is quite cold. Do you have a more precise description? Mrs. Halder's tone seemed to be a bit dissatisfied. Lu just felt a mountain of pressure. She racked her brains to ponder, practically replaying the series of observations she had of Luonan before and after they left the elevator. She thought over and over before speaking. He's absent-minded. He's a bit impatient. His eyelids drooped. He has no interest in Tianbang's words. At the same time, the tips of his feet turned outward and his body leaned to the side. He's been wanting to leave. Why did such a situation occur? Oh, it's very likely that he received important information that needed to be processed. His and Tianxi's expressions and actions were quite obvious when we were at the water bar. Mrs. Halder continued to ask questions, not giving Lu a chance to catch her breath. This is the main reason why Luonan is impatient. But when faced with a person like Tianbang, even if he doesn't have a deep hatred like we do, and even if he isn't a close friend, he is still a stakeholder. Don't tell me that he doesn't have the slightest desire to socialize? Lu muttered to herself. He's always been introverted. He's not good at socializing. What's the reason for this situation? Do you remember our conclusion from before? Luonan has a mask of weakness and a mask of strength. If the mask of weakness was in effect, then he should have displayed a courteous, respectful or shy appearance just now in order to obtain Tianbang's favorable impression. If the mask of strength was in effect, then sparks would have long since exploded between the two. And no matter what kind of mask it is, it wouldn't have this sort of effect. Lu responded instinctively. He has a third mask. Chapter 629. Fei Jin had already boarded the streetcar heading to Acumen College. Luonan had been delayed by Tianbang, so he had most likely missed this train. The two controllers didn't feel that this was a pity. This sort of chance encounter was not worth it, especially since Luonan was at the most critical moment of his mental analysis. The Blood Flame Order's base in Xia City quieted down as well. Mrs. Halder had roughly finished categorizing the intelligence data and was put together for the final time. She pulled out the third set of data that had never been put to use before. It was the list of Luonan's discussions of cultivation theory and lectures. She paused for a moment and searched through the other two groups, especially the group with the mask of strength. She put the data in one by one. Lu calmed down and carefully observed. She discovered that the new data that Mrs. Halder had put in belonged to Luonan's performance when he dealt with gray personnel. The so-called gray personnel were neither friend nor foe. They were people who lacked friendship and good feelings. They were people who couldn't be considered mortal enemies. It wasn't just Tianbang. The gossip's lord who had just spouted trouble and OK who had a conflict a few days ago over the location of the elusive secret device, were all in this group. If one were to go even further back, there were also a few ignorant second generations who dared to stroke a tiger's whiskers in the Ocean Sky Cloud City and Aurora Cloud City incident. There were also a few people from the management company in the Municipal Plaza incident. There were also a few people from the outer circle, represented by Hidong Lu, who were neither friendly nor aloof. Right now, Lu didn't need Mrs. Halder's guidance. Her mind was like a movie. She sorted through the data and a certain impression formed. She opened her mouth, wanting to speak, but she forcefully restrained herself. If you want to say it, then say it. Mrs. Halder's keen insight was displayed in full force at this moment. Yin Lu adjusted her breathing and said softly, I believe that Luo Nan is very distant from these people. Yes, distant. Aside from the few moments when he was stimulated to explode, where he had clear hostility and even killing intent, he basically ignored them. He was stiff, his thoughts jumped, and his mind was absent-minded. His mind wasn't on face-to-face communication at all. He was on a completely different frequency than these people. So, Mrs. Halder asked softly. Yin Lu was about to come to a conclusion, but she hesitated before she said, there's no strict classification of personas. It doesn't matter if it's the third persona. Perhaps we can call it the mask of alienation, for convenience. But we have to find the behind-the-scenes mechanism of its formation and operation to make sense. Mrs. Halder did not even raise her head. In other words, you only saw his attitude but not his logic. Yin Lu said, Boss, I believe that a person's thoughts and emotions are always continuous. From an outsider's point of view, it looked like it was jumping and torn, but from the person's point of view, it might be consistent and complete. It's just that we can't peek into people's hearts, we can only guess. Mrs. Halder interrupted her. Do you have any ideas? Yin Lu took another breath and took the initiative to flip through the materials. She spent a few minutes and found two rather special examples in the third type of materials. During the Ocean Sky Cloud City incident, Luo Nan, Black Beetle, Puppeteer, Snake Tongue, and the others had a relatively long exchange during the deadlock stage. The contents were all related to formatting theory such as order frames, gear coupling, and so on. Even further back, during the Fudong Avenue Frost River reality incident, he and Fairchild, who had yet to be identified as friend or foe, engaged in a cultivation discussion that was completely incompatible with the atmosphere. And when I looked through the communication records of the time, Luo Nan had an argument with the support personnel of the Xia City branch. The logic was disjointed, making communication difficult. Of course, there were elements of formatting theory interspersed within. That's right. Yin Lu clenched her fists as she let out a low cry. She was a bit annoyed, but she was even more excited. Actually, Mrs. Halder had long ago categorized all of this information. It was the same as giving her the most clear guidance. When the frequency was in sync, her train of thought naturally connected and flowed smoothly. I overlooked one point before. Formatting theory. This was the foundation of Luo Nan's existence. It was the foundation that separated him from external social relations. It was the foundation that was truly internalized. And the process of internalizing formatting theory should be the core element that influenced the composition of his personality. Then, I must start from the interaction between him and formatting theory. Yes, it can't be pure theory. There is also the enormous social and interpersonal pressure associated with it. Mrs. Halder's expression did not change. Her fingertips moved forward through a series of documents, finally stopping at a certain node. Luo Nan's formal contact with formatting theory should have been over 5 years ago. He was 10 years old at the time. A 10-year-old child with no foundation, no investment, no support, yet he resisted the enormous pressure to learn and inherit his grandfather's theory and grudges. There should be a sufficiently powerful motivation, right? Yin Lu didn't hesitate to respond. His family changed greatly when he was young. His grandfather, father, mother, and practically all of his immediate family members were caught in the maelstrom of formatting theory. They were even annihilated. This stimulation was enough. You just mentioned the interaction. Formatting theory has the value of allowing him to continue researching it in depth. Also, there is the effect of empathy. Through research, he can converse with his relatives and elders. This is an extremely important psychological compensation. Of course, it is also a driving force. Mrs. Halder raised an eyebrow. So we need to consider what he has experienced in this series of processes. We need to consider what he has obtained. I remember that before Luo Nan made his debut, his results were a series of neurological drugs. How did he obtain them? Yin Lu closed her eyes slightly. She put herself in Luo Nan's shoes and thought for a moment. She answered her own question. I heard that Luo Nan didn't have the conditions to test drugs. He could only use himself as a test subject. Of course, this process was filled with endless failures. It was extremely dangerous. He even struggled on the line between life and death. There was certainly anxiety, panic, self-doubt, and so on during this process. There were enormous sources of negative emotions. Mrs. Halder's voice entered her ears. But he has walked all the way to where he is now. He has obtained absolute accomplishments. So he has also obtained powerful self-confidence. No, that's wrong. Yinli's eyes were still closed. She denied her initial inference. This was because there weren't many circumstances that matched Luo Nan's performance in reality. He wasn't a proud and self-confident person. It is said that the basis of his series of research and experiments all came from his grandfather's notes. In that case, he doesn't trust himself. He trusts his grandfather's theory, formatting theory. Yinlu suddenly opened her eyes. That's right. From Luo Nan's perspective, researching formatting theory is tantamount to having an endless conversation with formatting theory. He is endlessly receiving the guidance of his grandfather. He is endlessly overcoming challenges, obtaining sufficient positive feedback from them, and he continues to strengthen his confidence and dedication towards this theory. At the same time, the process of loneliness has given him no reference to compare himself to. It has strengthened his mentality by a factor of 2. So this has turned him into a person who has internalized the ideals of formatting theory. He has used the ruler of ideals to measure things internally and externally, to others and to himself. So this isn't a mask of alienation. It's a mask of ideals. He is a young man who uses theoretical research every day to converse with his grandfather and his parents. Laughing and cursing in anger, warm and cold, and other socializing traits are really useless. It would be better to use formatting theory to evaluate and test him. If there's meaning, then he'll research. If there's no meaning, then he'll ignore it. This is the standard by which he conducts his judgment. This is his true dominant mask. Chapter 630. She roughly understood the classification of Luo Nan's persona masks. There were far too many examples that she could refer to. The persona mask was essentially an archetype theory. Once the archetype was extracted, she could always find similar cases that corresponded with it. People like Luo Nan have existed since ancient times. Yinlu wanted to make a further analysis. What followed next seemed to be much easier. After all, even if she ignored all sorts of medical cases, a few famous people could still reflect each other. This was especially true in the East Asian cultural area with its long history of civilization. There were far too many famous people throughout history who wore a persona mask. Yinli's thoughts spun and she thought of a fellow who was quite similar to Luo Nan. This person was a famous historian and politician. He belonged to the conservative faction. His mind was filled with patriarchal principles. He shut himself in a basement to write books for 15 years. The relevant concepts were completely internalized. Later on, when he was in power and governed the country, he would only listen to his ideas. He became a typical representative of people who talked reason behind closed doors. Don't casually bring out examples. Don't do stupid things like using words to destroy the meaning. Mrs. Halder saw through Yinli's thoughts. She didn't let her thoughts wander too far. Luo Nan himself possesses an extremely special nature. No famous historical figure would have a semi-philosophical system like formatting theory, where the mighty power belongs to the self. Moreover, it can be practiced, applied, and modified at any time. Modified? Yinlu was a bit stunned. Wasn't Luo Nan's persona mask an extreme paranoia towards formatting theory? In this way, he should be like that extremely conservative historian. He couldn't change the laws of his ancestors in the slightest. Oh, hold on. There seems to be a problem with the direction. Mrs. Halder didn't test Yinlu any further. She straightforwardly expressed her opinion. Perhaps Luo Nan himself doesn't believe that formatting theory is completely correct. This can be seen from his attitude during the lecture on the 14th. Back then his speech was quite cautious. He always used self-mockery and jokes to dispel the extreme authority of formatting theory. Let's not talk about the more complicated background for now. From the analysis of these circumstances and the information we know, he is very stubborn towards formatting theory. However, he doesn't have a particularly paranoid view towards whether formatting theory is correct or not. In the end, his stubbornness towards formatting theory is just a kind of empathy. The ideals of formatting theory are just a mask he uses to treat his imaginary close relatives. This is because he only has this mask to choose from when facing his grandfather and parents in the void. To put it more bluntly, he is only courting. The word courting was a rather sensitive word. There were two ways to interpret it in the dictionary, and what the two first ablatums were communicating was obviously the more ancient kind, which was simply seeking affection. Is it a need for emotions and belonging? Enle took the initiative to analyze using Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Madame Halder agreed. You can say it that way. There is a high probability that Luo Nan himself is on the third level. He urgently needs the comfort of the relevant emotions. This is a pretty good starting point. But soon she changed the topic. But at the same time you have to understand the influence of empathy. After a long period of empathy, to a certain extent he was the projection of his grandfather and parents' needs. He wanted to fulfill the wishes of his closest kin, which made his needs much greater than that of a normal person. In such a situation he would most likely have the problem of being closely involved in the situation, and might not understand what he really needed. If we start from the emotional aspect it might seem like a straight line, but it might actually be the most difficult path. This was equivalent to denying Enle's thoughts. Enle's eyebrows knitted together. She felt that it was a bit of a pity, after all it's a core element. Mrs. Halder's lips hooked slightly. We aren't psychologists. We have no reason to treat him. Am I right? This reason was quite strong. Enle was dumbfounded. Of course, Enle understood Mrs. Halder's true meaning. If Luo Nan's core driving force was said to be courting, then the various personality masks were the outer muscles and bones. Using courting as the foundation to expand his mental power would form a permeating influence on all the personality masks. But this influence was distorted by his primal instincts and other factors, forming a bewildering barrier that Luo Nan himself might not be clear about. So he still relied on the personality mask both consciously and unconsciously when it came to dealing with people and matters. In front of this defensive maze, the scalpel that was suitable for surgery might not be suitable for psychological attacks. Enle wasn't dejected. Instead she felt that her thoughts were becoming clearer and clearer. Of course her boss was far better than her boss. With her boss protecting her she tried to continue deducing in a different direction. Then we can only start from the mask. Go from shallow to deep. Which mask? Of course it's the concept mask. There's no harm in being more specific. As boss. Enle wasn't stingy with her words. She narrated her train of thought, allowing her boss to examine, refer, and verify. I'm using the method of elimination. Even if I can't be considered the dominant position of the concept mask, the other two masks need not be mentioned. The strong mask is too straightforward and simple. There's no way to beat around the bush. No matter who wins or loses, one side is bound to be smashed to pieces. It's not suitable. As for the weak mask, we can only start from emotions. The reason we can't do this is because there are too many uncontrollable factors, boss. Plus, under the influence of the core driving force of courting, we can deduce that this mask is actually an important source of replenishment for the psychological needs of courting. It looks weak, but it's actually extremely selfish and sensitive. I'm afraid that the concept mask on the other side will also be staring at us while we stare at this mask. If we aren't careful, we'll make a mistake and cause trouble. Mrs. Halder nodded slightly. Then we can only use the concept mask. Yes. Is there a better reason? Stability. The greatest advantage of the concept mask is stability. Mrs. Halder gave a smile that wasn't a smile. Are you sure? I'm sure. Enle's thoughts reached this point and she already grasped the pearl of wisdom. During the formation process of the concept mask, Luo Nan was in an extreme environment. He lacked a sense of security and he lacked true communication. Therefore, there's a high probability that he's a latent perfectionist with obsessive-compulsive symptoms. Sometimes he'll be extremely anxious, impatient, and weak. This matches with my previous analysis. But due to the special characteristics of the concept mask, the pressure of the symbiotic emotional and psychological elements will shift to other masks. This will become a high-probability event. For example, anxiety, panic, and weakness will be thrown to the weak mask. Ego, pride, and so on will be thrown to the strong mask. The elements left behind in the concept mask are relatively perfect. The more perfect it is, the more likely it will become the basis and yardstick for judgment. In this way, of the three main masks, the concept mask will inevitably be the core. The weak mask and the strong mask will wait for an opportunity to appear. From Luo Nan's daily behavior, he would be fine in a relatively simple situation. He would use the weak mask in front of friends and family to obtain sympathy and love. He would use the strong mask to erupt in front of a great enemy from the inner world, killing his way through. At this time the two masks are relatively stable. His behavior and train of thought are easy to estimate. But the problem is that these are two completely different concepts and methods. I can't find a point of compromise between them. It would be fine if the logic of behavior was completely different from that of the inner world and that of the secular world. But there are quite a few overlaps. This creates a barrier. It creates a separation and a tear in behavior. Once the situation becomes complicated, for example in the water bar, where Big Mouth Chow of the Divine Research Society was disrespectful to his mother, the weak mask and the strong mask instantly switch. Luonan wanted to kill Big Mouth Chow, but his target was just an ordinary person with enmity. And because of Fei Jin's interference, the situation didn't reach its worst state. In this way the strong mask wasn't completely suitable, and the weak mask didn't have the space to make an appearance. A tear was created and the concept mask naturally filled in this gap. Luonan made a judgment based on the concept mask. Big Mouth Chow wasn't worth analyzing and pondering. There was no need to waste energy on him and create more trouble. So he restrained his emotions and Big Mouth Chow was able to preserve his life. In those few seconds, whether it was the weak mask or the strong mask, all of them revealed their unstable characteristics. Only the concept mask became the basis for Luonan's behavior. Yin Li's analysis took a long time, but the result was extremely clear. Though this is just an independent incident, I believe that a careful analysis of all of Luonan's related incidents will lead to this conclusion. Any long-term contact with his weak mask or strong mask, under the influence of many factors, will ultimately face the judgment of the concept mask. Rather than this, it would be better to make preparations to communicate with the concept mask from the very beginning. This way the uncertainties will be reduced to the minimum. Mrs. Halder listened quietly. She no longer tidied up the materials. In the end she even narrowed her eyes. Her face was like an ancient well without ripples, concealing all of her emotions. Yin Lu had been brimming with confidence when she made a long speech, but she felt an inexplicable lack of confidence when she saw this situation. Boss, did I say something wrong? No, you didn't. Unless we are able to squeeze into Luonan's circle of friends and family in the first instance, this is the only path we can take. Mrs. Halder opened her eyes, but her gaze was cast toward the neon-changing night sky outside the window. I was just thinking that headquarters of the Ability User Society as well as a few other people were in a rush to appear. They didn't complete their task, but they did leave us plenty of references. We can be considered lucky, but will we succeed in one fell swoop? Or will we become one of the many examples for others to analyze and ridicule? Boss. Yinlu was shocked and at a loss. She didn't know why Mrs. Halder had suddenly sighed with emotion. Those who predict others also predict others. Those who know others don't necessarily know themselves. Only with this kind of self-awareness can we face the future with a good attitude. Mrs. Halder chuckled. Her gaze turned to Yin Li's youthful, tender and beautiful face. Let's do things according to your train of thought. Come up with a plan tonight and let me see it tomorrow morning. Oh right. Take Fei Jin home first. Don't let anything go wrong. With that she stood up and walked out of the room. Boss, you're going out to relax.